contain some material that are not suitable for kids. So please get them out of the room before showing this video. Thank you! Hello everyone, this is Dragon Videos, ready to present a first ever Halloween based video for Halloween month as my special segment. I know this year's Halloween will be a little different, but I think it wouldn't hurt to talk a little bit about some Halloween-based subjects, or more specifically, horror movies that you'd always watch on Halloween. Now, in the American horror movie franchise, I've noticed there's been a lot about werewolves, and yeah, a whole lot of freaking werewolves. Don't include Twilight in this. And then we have vampires that are probably worse than Edward Cullen. And then you have ghosts. And don't get me wrong, there were some good ghost movies, though I haven't watched a whole lot of ghost-based movies. And then of course we have the infamous popularity of the zombies. They're practically dominating the Hollywood franchise, and I get it, it's because of the pandemic. But tell me, is anyone else finding this a bit old? So, for this list, I'm doing a top 5 monsters from mythology who seem capable of being horror movie material not only in the American franchise, but everywhere else around the world, just to help a fresh pace. But bear in mind that these monsters are from a special mythology and should not be in the hands of Syfy. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Syfy channel. I saw your werewolf, and oh my god, it's atrocious. It's practically a Scooby-Doo reject. I mean, seriously, does anyone see a wolf or an orca in this thing? Anyone? Anyone? No, I didn't think so. Okay, I better start this list before I explode. Don't let this weird-looking creature fool you. The kappa is a yokai from Japan, or basically a spirit that lives within the water. It's usually known to be very protective of its territory, up to the point where it will not be so hesitant to attack people that comes by their turf. And yeah, their way of doing it is pretty grisly, but they're not without reason. You see, the only way you can negotiate them and come away from them safely is to actually write a name on a cucumber or pickle, I forgot about that portion of the myth, but throw it into the river, and by then, you're spared from the kappa. And the reason why I put them on the list is because they have been known to be in at least one movie franchise called the Death Kappa. But I thought it would be kind of cool to see them as being used more in terms of monster movies because of just how they approach humans in general. Everything comes in a price after all. Now, when people hear the word fairy, they're gonna think of a humanoid or elf-like creature that's very small, dinky looking, and has fragile butterfly or dragonfly wings, then flutters around sprinkling magic. But do not be fooled if you are familiar with Irish fairy tales or any sort of fairy tales. There are some that cause serious mischief. Heck, many of you could probably remember the old Peter Pan with Tinkerbell would probably be not above of hurting Wendy whenever possible. So anyway, in the horror movie franchise, there have been some stories about fairies who would basically come and steal children, create plagues, basically give misery to humanity whenever chance they get, or sometimes if the humans disrupt their homes without even so much as a warning. And actually, there are some horror movies that actually have fairies on there. For instance, we have the Leprechaun series. And for many who are not familiar with the leprechaun, yes, the leprechaun is actually a species of fairy. Though it does not look like it, it actually is, and it's definitely not one you'd really want to steal a pot of gold from. And then there's another one called The Hollow, and I didn't watch the movie per se, but I definitely got an idea that it's pretty terrifying and involves the concepts of changelings or fairy babies. I never really understand that concept too well. Anyway, I put them at number 9 on this list is because they have a good amount of weaknesses. Usually iron. Iron kind of scares them off at some point, though there can also be uses of runes and certain metals to drive away the fairies. So in some ways they can still be useful in terms of being frightening creatures, but with their capability of weakness, it can leave a limitation to how the story is going to go. So, these creatures, the gargoyles, can sometimes represent demons or angels depending on how they're set up. Usually they are taking the form of animal-like creatures with wings. Usually you may be familiar with them if you've seen them in Notre Dame or on some of the churches that would have those decorations up. Sometimes you can see them at houses. And the reason why they're on there is because they are used to prevent evil spirits or evil beings from entering the sacred places. Now, I thought it would be cool to have these guys in a horror movie because they are just, one, creepy looking, but also because of how unpredictable they are. I mean, think about it. They're made of stone, just like the angels from Doctor Who. And if they get pissed off for a very solid reason, if written well, they could definitely come off as coming out of nowhere and a good sudden attack with a well-timed jump scare. However, they do have a one weakness alone, and that is water. And part of the reason why, if you think about it, is because water wears away stone over time. Think about the many times you've seen it with rain. Anyway, I put these guys high up on the list is because they can also act as protagonists as well as antagonists, and most of the time they only just serve as fighting evil more than being an evil entity altogether. However, I still haven't thrown the possibility that they might become the next horror movie monsters if allowed to do so. This walking nightmare is actually a cryptid. The Jersey Devil has claws of enamel that I'm still foggy with. There is also the face of a donkey, the hooves of a donkey, as well as, in some depictions, has a hooked-like tail. Anyway, with the Jersey Devil, it is known to prey upon the house of American legends, and of course attacks people. Though the biggest question was why on earth it always preys on kids. and not many people know the answer about that. But the reason why I put them on this list of horror movie monsters is because of how elusive and frightening they are. The stories behind them are so terrifying. They practically bray like crazy and use dog-like noses to sniff out their prey, which definitely would make them very terrifying competitors. But they're cryptids, so they're pretty hard to find, and there may not be a whole lot of study in terms of weakness and how to make them elaborate horror movie monsters. The imp are kind of small demons at this point. They can definitely cause hell to you, literally. Usually they're associated with the underworld, and there have been a few sightings, I believe, in real life as well. I felt like they could have belonged into the horror movie franchise because they're very small and could easily creep into a house. As well as, I guess some of them can be about the size of a dog, but still can cause some serious damage. If you think about it, that could be something similar to that of gremlins. And some of the weaknesses can be holy water, probably a few herbs and such, and maybe runes, depending on what direction that the writers would go with. Anyway, I put them further up on the list because their small size can make them hard to defeat, as well as their capability of being very crafty and cunning. Heck, I'm pretty sure that they could get a hold of a TV and practically short-circuit it up to the point where it would explode. But bear in mind, due to its small size, there could be some creative issues with it. But I put them on here anyway because they could still do some damage. I know some of you would immediately think Harry Potter with this creature, but I felt like with this one it seemed more appropriate to give it the head of a rooster, more bird-like sort of deal. Now the basilisk has the capability of killing people and any other creature with a single glance. The only animals that seem to be immune to it are weasels, though I don't know why, as well as the crow of a rooster can make it back away. It also is a very hard competitor to fight with because it would be found in dungeons as well as certain labyrinths, dry places where you wouldn't find sources of water. In other words, you'd be pretty much out of luck if you were to go up against a creature that has the capability of killing you with so much as giving you a gaze. Also, it is very lethal in its hunting techniques. It has a bit of a serpentine body in the head of a rooster, so of course you're going to have a hard time with taking on something with a beak that can rip you to shreds. But I put them, and which is why I put them further down this list, because they're not as well known, and I felt like they have such high potential of being there. I also put them on this high of a list is because of their weakness. Again, mirrors are one of the few weaknesses you can do it, because, again, they were having a gaze that could literally kill anyone. And I'm pretty sure gazing into their own eyes could actually result into their own deaths. Also, the crow of a rooster would make an effective weapon and would probably be an instant end if it were taken to the countryside. So I felt like there's some potential with this creature, but it would have to be based on certain amounts of creativity and writing to be put together. So this guy is the cockatrice. I know the basilisk and the cockatrice can be confusing because they nearly have the same abilities, as well as the fact that they can hatch from eggs from very old birds. And here's the thing about the cockatrice. It has the capability of also killing with a single gaze, but it also has a breath that can paralyze or kill anyone it comes across. Its only weaknesses are basically a weasel and also a rooster, and which is why I feel like they're both well, this one was further down the list because of the killer breath, which can definitely pose a serious problem when you're faced up against this enemy compared to the gaze. Oh, you know I would never complete this list without at least a dragon or two. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe dragons could also be very good horror movie material. I mean, think about it. These creatures can be large, they can be small, but they also have a variety of breath attacks. And if willingly, they could also perform different kinds of magic if intelligent enough to do so, or being controlled by another human being, which I feel like they're number 3 on this list because of those capabilities and freelancing these dragons can be. Even though there are some that can be potentially good, having an antagonistic dragon that's within the horror genre, as well as possibly being a very hostile creature, can definitely make the horror story take on a fresh take. I mean, sure, we've had Godzilla, we've had King Kong, but when was the last time when we've had a bona fide frightening dragon that's not from a 100% bona fide fantasy genre? I mean, sure, it could be fantasy horror, but I felt like this was a possibility because, again, of the freelancing, and if there had to be designed, it could be something similar to this, or in some cases, it could take on a more zombie-like appearance. Yes, I hate zombies, but I felt like at least with the dragon, it definitely would take a more fresher turn with this. Maybe it would have some issues with the modern-day audience, but that never stopped anyone before. And of course, there's still freelancing. The possibilities can be endless. The Kelpie is a water spirit. Unlike the Kappa though, it doesn't have a certain restraint. Usually it can go out of water for probably a certain amount of time. Anyway, this one is found in Scotland as well as it's also part of the Celtic myths. You see, this water spirit is known to prey on humans and can take on the form of a horse, usually which happens the majority of the time, and has sticky adhesive skin whenever they try to go riding on top of it. It could also take the form of a risque woman as well as a very hairy man. They also have a very freakish laugh, supposedly described as that of thunder. They only have one weakness, unlike the rest of the creatures, which is why I put them in this further up on the list, or at least close to being number 2 on this list. It's because they only have one weakness alone, and that is putting a bridle on them. Once they have a bridle on in their horse form, you can have complete control over them. And this is why I thought they would be good horror movie monsters, because not only does it take a fresh spin on playing with a horse phobia, but yet at the same time can give us that sense of dread on taking on an enemy that's nearly invisible. Now, many of you remember Robin Williamson's favorite character we all know and love, the genie from the old Aladdin, not the new one that came out. But anyway, we always see him as this bright, cheerful being that could grant wishes anytime, anywhere. But like fairies, there's always a catch. And this catch is, in the Arabian tales, they can be wish granters as long as you have a ring or possibly a lamp, but they could also be very dangerous demons or mystical creatures that have the capability of bending reality and everything else at their own command. And this is what makes them so terrifying as ideal horror monster movies, because they can twist anyone's wishes into a horrible nightmare and even at some points drive them mad to kill each other and possibly leave no survivors in some cases. And this is why I put the genies at number 1 on this list. They are very unpredictable, they're powerful, they can twist and manipulate you, and they barely have any weakness. I mean, nothing else but a song or a lamp could stop these powerful beings. And if I were you, and if you have a genie, proceed with caution. Well, that wraps up for this list. This is Dragon Videos, and it's gonna be a while until you may see me again for Halloween month. But rest assured, I will be discussing more of these Halloween-based topics. So stay tuned for some spooks, some freaks, and possibly a couple other guests that will be coming up in this month.
Dragon, you do realize what Halloween month means, right?
Yeah, so what's the problem with that, Artemis? It's just good, clean Halloween fun.
Well, aren't you worried some villains might try to take over or attack you again like they did last year?
Trust me, Artemis, I always keep my spell books with me, and there's no way those villains are gonna come at me. After what happened last year with Winnie the Pooh, I feel like I'm gonna have every Disney hero and every character that specializes in magic, as well as my own, to make sure the villains behave themselves. Trust me, nothing will go wrong this year for Halloween.